All right, folks. So in this video, we're going to go over intervals. So an interval measures the distance between two notes. The first thing we're going to do is talk about generic intervals and then get into specific intervals. When two notes occupy the same line or space, they're called a first or prime, or in this case, I'm going to say unison. So anytime you have two notes and they're in the same line or space, they just repeat, and it would be unison. This is a C and a C. That would be D and E unisons. Okay. You can call it a first, but if I ever say the word unison, you need to translate it to first. As the notes become further apart on the staff, the interval type increases. So just like on the solfege ladder on the wall, if we go up to the next rung of the ladder, we go up by a second. So do to re would be a second. Same thing here. If we go from line to space, that's a second. Or space to line, that's a second. And the same thing is true if we go down. If these were all reversed, they'd still be seconds. Stop it. There we go. Now, if you have two notes that are line to line or space to space, and they stack up like a snowman, those are called thirds. We count the first note and the second note, but we also count that note that would happen in between 1, 2, 3, and they would become thirds. Notice that thirds will always share the same staff position type, either both a line or a space. So a third is always going to be one line away from its first note. A fourth is going to be opposite line and space. So if it's on a space, the fourth will be on a line. If the bottom note is on a line, the fourth above it will be on a space. But you can also count 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces in between. I'll do that again. It's kind of hard to see my mouse. But if I count the first note, which is on a C line, that's 1. This is the D space, that's 2. This is the E line, that's 3. And then our fourth. If I go line to skip a middle line and go to the next line or two lines away, let me try that again. If my first note is on a line and I skip the middle line and go to the next line, that's a fifth. Same thing with a space. This note is on a space. I skip the space in between. Here's my next space. That's a fifth. A sixth will be kind of like a fourth, right? You start with a note on a line. The next note, or sorry, the sixth above will be on a space. Or if you start on a space, the next, oh my gosh, I cannot talk. If you start on a space, the sixth above will be on a line. And fourths and sixths look similar, but the sixths are much further apart. A seventh will be line. If you start on a line, it'll be a line, skip a line, skip a line, and then it'll be the third line away from the next line. Or if you're in a space, it'll be the third space away. And then if you have a line note and you see a space note on the next space after the fourth, after the seventh, it says eighth, but we're going to call that an octave. Octagon has 8 sides. Octopus has 8 legs. Octave is 8 notes away. Okay? And these are all of the intervals stacked up against each other. A unison, the seconds are going to have to get stacked in a stair step like that. So if you ever see two notes stacked in a diagonal, you can tell that that's a second. A third will look like a snowman. A fourth is kind of like the snowman, except for it's line to space, or if the bottom note is a space, the next one will be a line. A fifth is two lines away or two spaces away. A sixth is just above a fifth. A seventh is just above a sixth. And then the octave will be 8 notes away. So those are generic intervals, how they're going to look. So as I'm reading sheet music, I can kind of at a glance see if I'm looking at a unison, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or eighth. But there's another thing that we have to add into intervals, and that is specific intervals. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing. No, I didn't. That was right. So an interval can be major or minor, augmented or diminished, or perfect. Weird. All right. We're only going to glance over these things today. And then over the course of your time with me as a choir director, I'll try to build your ear. So even though you're learning these today, I just want you to store these in your brain as um, things to keep in mind throughout the course of being a choir student. Okay? So I can have a major second or a minor second, or I can also call this a, um, a whole step or a half step. And if I were to play these specific notes on the piano, I would be playing this note and this note by playing this key here and this key here. But if I put a flat sign on the second note, I would be playing this key here and this one up here. So if I only look at the top where my mouse is kind of panning across there, you can see that I have white key, black key, white key, black key, bleh, that's hard to say. White key, black key, white key, black key, white, black, and you can kind of see this pattern emerging. If I'm looking only up here, every time I cross a key, it's a half step or a minor second. If I go down here, all of the white keys are either a major second or a minor second. Check this out. If I skip a black key in between, I'm playing a major second. So I've skipped this key that's labeled number 1. So still a second, but it's a major second. If I start on 2, skip this black key, and play this one, it's a major second. But here, there's no black key in between. So if I go from this key to this key, it's actually a minor second. So if I look at the top of the piano, I can tell where all of my half steps are. And then if I want a whole step, I just skip a key in between. If you direct your attention to the solfege ladder on the wall, whether that's in my high school choir room or junior high school choir room, there are 2 places on the ladder where the rungs are closer together. That is exactly like the piano, where there are 2 places on the piano where there are 2 white keys together. So that happens here, and then the piano is just the ladder that continues, right? Um, so the piano should mirror the solfege ladder. All right, enough about that. So we're going to move on. A major second is made up of 2 half steps. So from this red arrow to number 1 is 1 half step. From 1 to 2 is the second half step. And from this red arrow to the number 2 is a half step. A minor second is, another example of a major second would be here, where I start on this key But since there's no black key in between, the red arrow to the number 1 is a minor second, and 1 to 2 is a minor second. And so this red arrow here to the number 2, or arrow to arrow, is a major second. Now, a major third is made up of 4 half steps. So red arrow to number 1, half step. Number 1 to number 2, half step. That's 2 half steps. 2 to 3, third half step. And 3 to 4, fourth half step. And then arrow to arrow is a major third. Now, if I'm playing a third or a series of thirds on the piano, if I start on here, follow my pointer. If I start on this note and I skip a white key and play this note, it's going to be a third. If I start here and skip a white key, it's going to be a third. So if I ignore for just a second, if I ignore the black keys and go back to generic intervals, anytime I skip a key on the piano, it's going to be a third. But based on where I'm playing that, it might be a minor third. It might be a major third. So it's going to sound different. But if I put all 5 fingers here, thumb, pointer, middle, ring, pinky, and only play every other finger, so thumb and middle, or pointer and ring, I'm going to get thirds. Here's an example of a major third, but starting with that series of 2 white keys in the middle. And so you'll notice that if I start with this arrow here and go to the number 1, that's 1 half step. 1 to 2 is the second half step. 2 to 3 is the third half step. But when I go 3 to 4, I'm going to have to play a black key if I want the major third to happen. So if I start on E or on this note over here, I'm going to assume then that my major third is going to have to be one of my black keys. Now, a fourth is one of the 2 intervals, well, one of the 3 intervals that could be perfect. Okay, I'm not going to go over why we call it perfect instead of major or minor. I'm just going to leave you with it's called a perfect fourth. Okay, that's 5 half steps. A perfect fifth, same thing. I'm not going to go over why it's called perfect. I'm just going to tell you it is 7 half steps. A major sixth is made up of 9 half steps. A seventh is made up of 11. And a perfect octave is made up of 12 half steps. This one's easy to see on the piano because no matter where I'm at on the piano, if I look at the pattern of the piano, so 2 black keys, 3 black keys, 2 black keys, 3 black keys, that pattern repeats on the piano over and over and over again. So if I were to start where this number 5 is and want to play an octave above, I would just have to play the next key that is just to the left of a group of 3. So group of 3 just to the left, my octave from number 5 up is here. Okay, so if you are in my high school groups, that might make a lot of sense. If you're in my 6th grade group and your brain hurts a little bit, that's okay too. You'll have time to review this video and it'll make sense the more you learn. The terms major and perfect refer to the interval's quality, so how it sounds. Only seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths can have a major quality. Unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves use perfect. Okay, so minor intervals are just slightly smaller than major. This is a minor third. So for example, since C to E is a major third, 4 half steps, C to E flat is a minor third, 3 half steps. E to G, also a major third, 4 half steps, But if I did, if I did 3 half steps, so E to F sharp, it would be a minor third. Since minor intervals transform from major intervals, only seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths can be minor. And I'm going to just brush this. Okay, so if this doesn't make sense to you right now, at least you've heard it. Okay, so you can have major and minor, and major transforms to minor, and minor transforms to major. If you have a perfect interval, it can become augmented. So this is just an example of an augmented interval. And perfect can become diminished. Okay? So a perfect interval, instead of becoming major or minor, can become diminished. Now, backing up for just a second. Augmented and diminished don't always apply to perfect. You can also have a major interval and make it augmented. And you can have a minor interval and it would become diminished. So augmented and diminished can cross this dotted line, but major and minor cannot. So certain intervals can be perfect, augmented, or diminished. And certain intervals can be major, minor, diminished, and augmented, but not perfect. Okay? The biggest takeaway here is the qualities that you can have of an interval are augmented, major, minor, perfect, and diminished. And seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths can only be major or minor, not perfect, while as unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves, or unisons being firsts and octaves being eighths, can be augmented or diminished, just like this side over here, but cannot be major or minor. They can only be perfect. Okay, so you don't need to know what that means. You just need to understand that these 4 intervals can be major or minor, but not perfect, while these 4 intervals can only be perfect, not major or minor, and all of these intervals can have an augmented version or a diminished version. Whew, that's going to hurt our brains for a while. There are these things in the world called double flats, and there are these things in the world called double sharps. Just showing you that they exist, store that away for later. Okay, here's a nice little chart that shows you how many half steps in a thing and what that thing can be. So a unison can only be perfect or augmented. A second can be diminished, minor, or major, or augmented. A third can be diminished, minor, major, and augmented. A fourth can be diminished, perfect, or augmented. Same thing with a fifth, diminished, perfect, or augmented. Sixths can be diminished, minor, major, or augmented. Sevenths, same thing, diminished, minor, major, or augmented. And octaves can only be diminished, perfect, or augmented. So the only one that can't be diminished is a unison, but you can't diminish a unison. In other words, if you make something less than 1, it becomes 0. And so in music, 0 is nothing, no sound. So it can't be diminished because perfect unisons, by definition, are the same note twice. If I make it any less than that, it defeats the purpose of playing music, right? All right, so hopefully your brain hurts just a little bit, and if your brain hurts, that means it's learning.